Working in management or leadership can also be stressful. And so it's important that we take a little bit of time just to think about what is stress, how does it affect us, how do we handle it, how do we deal with it. This is a stress curve, and what you can see is that as the level of stress increases, so our ability to perform varies. So if there is too little stress, if we are underloaded, then actually we don't perform terribly well. We're fairly inactive, all the way through to being quite laid back. But as the level of stress increases, there is an optimum level of stress, this yellow bracket, where we really perform very well. Of course, if the stress level carries on and there's too much or overload, then actually we start to move past fatigue and into exhaustion, and we actually start coming back off of the high performance, to the point that as the stress level increases, we actually are heading towards burnout with anxiety, panic attacks, breakdown, and so forth. So, we have to recognize that a certain amount of stress is optimum, but too much, or in fact too little, actually is not helpful for us. In our working days, there is always going to be some background level of personal stress that is unique to us. In addition to that, this is sort of to do with how we see life, how anxious we are, how we handle the unknown, and so forth. On top of that is going to be stacked the environmental stress of the day. The context that we are in, if we are in a difficult environment, in a different environment, etc. And then on top of that will come specific events. Something will happen that spike our stress level. And so, at that point, that is the amount of stress that we are under. Now, it's entirely possible that the same person may be in the same environment, and there may be a different event, that is far more stressful and actually pushes them way up. Equally, it can be that the same person, given in a very different environment, even a small event may actually be more stressful to them. So, for example, if I am working in my own office, in my own way, and I'm comfortable with that, then I can handle some quite difficult events coming along. But if I was the same person, me, but if I was working in a completely different country and a completely different office that I wasn't familiar with, and the people around me I'm not familiar with, there's a whole lot more background stress going on, and sometimes even just then a small thing will be enough to push me over into what I'm not comfortable with. So what are some of the things that we can do to manage the stresses that are going to come along? Well, one of them actually is very simply to separate, even if it's only in our mind, to separate our concerns from our responsibilities. Because there are things for which we are responsible. There are things that we have to manage, that we have to do something about. But there are also a whole bunch of stuff that we're interested in, we're concerned about it, but actually we can't do anything about it. And it is important, at least in our own mind, to be clear which things we are concerned about and which things we are responsible for. And those things that we are responsible for, we have to deal with them. And those things that we are concerned about, well, sometimes we just have to hand our concerns to God and say, this is stressful for me. Can you deal with it? When people have studied the various causes of burnout, there was one particular famous study that was made of 7,500 employees, and looked at 7,500 employees who had, for one reason or another, burnt out. They had gone too far on the stress line and had to quit, give up, sometimes medical, all the rest of it. What were the causes of those burnout? Well, these were the top 5 things that were listed. And it's interesting to me that actually all 5 of them, they're actually organizational issues that the leaders of the organization were responsible for, could have managed. So unfair treatment at work. Well, that's all about policies and line management. Unmanageable workload. A line manager should be watching the load that is on their staff. A lack of role clarity. That should have been sorted out right at the beginning when somebody was orientated. Lack of good communication and support from their manager. That should be handled. And unreasonable time pressures. All of these are things that leaders should be taking responsibility for. But, of course, if you are in this situation and you have a manager who is not looking after you, there are still certain things that you can do to take more care of yourself. I'm sure you will have heard of the idea of there being a work-life balance, and that we need to find the right balance between these two. I personally think this is actually a false dichotomy. Splitting the world into these different categories, I think that's not actually helpful, because that makes out that work is the baddie, it's the stressful, unpleasant thing, whereas life is the beautiful, lovely thing. It's not that simple, because actually work should be a joy. It should be a blessing for us, particularly if we're doing something that we're really called to do. It should be very fulfilling and satisfying. Whereas life, life is where, the dental bills come from, the angry teenagers, the death of a loved one, school reports, unhappy relatives, that's all in life as well. So, it's not real. It's not realistic to split between bad work and good life. That's not simple. It's just not true. But there are things that we can look at to try and find a right balance in our lives. During World War II, prisoners of war who were encamped in Japan and Vietnam, they were in incredibly stressful situations often. And some research was carried out afterwards, after the war was finished, to try and identify those prisoners who were completely broken by this experience and those which managed to bounce back. And there was 4 lessons that could be drawn from this study. There was 4 keys to resilience, as they called it. They said those people that understood the context, they had a better chance of surviving it. Those people who embraced innovation as the norm, new things are happening all of the time. Stuff is developing, it's evolving, it's changing. You don't always know what is coming. Those people who were ready to recognize that changing environment, they were more likely to survive. Those who engaged others with love, those who reached out and who served other people, they tended to survive better in that stressful environment. And those who saw and cultivated the hero in others, who encouraged and lifted up other people, they themselves survived better. In thinking about resilience and our ability to cope with stress, it's perfectly right that we should think about the regular week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And of course, Christians believe that the world was made in 6 days, and then on the 7th day, God stopped. God rested. He reflected on what he had done. And that set in motion a pattern where we're still following it today, of having a 7-day week with 1 day of rest. Now, some countries, including Russia, tried some other options in different places. At one time they tried a 5-day week. They've tried a 6-day week. I think they tried an 8-day week as well, to try and get more productivity out of people. But in all of their experiments, it turned out that actually a 7-day week was in fact the most productive, the most conducive to humanity cycle that there is. And so in each working day, we need to get a good balance between those things that fill us up, the things that drain us, that fill us up, that do our work, that help us to grow, to develop, and so forth. And we need to get a balance of these different things. As one person said, the notes in the music are important, but actually there has to be gaps as well. That rest that we find in between the notes, that actually is what helps to make the music really good. You will possibly know that students who try to study for 7 days in a week ongoingly, they actually don't do as well in their studies as those who choose to rest for 1 day or even 2 days each week. Professional athletes, they know that they have to work really hard to build muscles, but they also have to rest. If they fail to have proper rest times at the right time, then the muscles just become inflamed, and they don't actually have the chance to grow. They just are exhausted, overused. And it's interesting, this 7-day week thing, the Jewish practice is that actually the week begins with the Sabbath. And the Sabbath starts on the evening of Friday. And so, the week starts with rest and then goes into the week. So starting from a position of reflection and thinking, where do I need to go? What is it that God is calling me to? What do I need to achieve this week? Starting from that position of reflection and rest, then going into a week of work. Whereas for many of us, we've actually flipped this around, and we think that we have to work, and then we have a rest when we're exhausted. But actually it's the wrong way around. It should be like this, that we start from a position of rest and say, okay, from this position of rest, I will reflect on what is coming, and I will work out what I'm going to do with this coming week. And actually it's quite a good idea to practice, whether it's, in our day, spending a little bit of time at the beginning of the day to plan, what are we doing with the day? At the beginning of the week, the Sabbath, what are we going to do with this week? Maybe in each season, we can be thinking, what does this coming season hold for us? Maybe we make monthly plans. I don't know, whatever it is. But I do know that it is important that we take care of ourselves. On board the aircraft, they say if you have to put on the oxygen mask, put it on yourself first, then look after those who are around you. There's a similar sort of saying of you need to drink before you get thirsty. Once you're getting thirsty, like out in a desert, in a really dangerous situation, if you're already getting thirsty, you're already in trouble. You have to drink before you get thirsty. So I would encourage you, do take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. You have to be able to manage your own time if you want to be able to manage other people. If you want to lead others, you have to first be able to lead yourself. If you want to call, inspire, engage other people, you first need to be called and inspired, maybe by God.